As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We have an important returning guest tonight. Craig Hemke, founder of the TF Metals Report, is here with us on Reluctant Preppers. We're glad to have you back, Craig. You're a commentator on the precious metals markets and the global economic situation. Thanks for joining us again here on Reluctant Preppers.
Dunnigan, it's always a pleasure, and timing is right. I think we're set up for a rather interesting 2017.
It's been a rather tumultuous end as we get near the end of 2016. We just came through a very contentious presidential debate and election cycle, and with the, for many people, a surprise result of the election of Donald Trump. And the market certainly had a cataclysmic reaction to that. There was a new historical record set. If you could touch base with us on what was the immediate fallout of the elections and what happened in the next 24 hours that had never happened before in history.
It was pretty remarkable to watch. I sat on my sofa actually the night of the Brexit vote back on June the 23rd and watched what was almost indescribable, watching all of these markets trade all over the world. In anticipation of a similar event, I think the central banks and the big banks were more prepared this time if the election started to roil the markets the way it did. And boy, did we ever see some direct interventions. As we look at the stock market back on election day, it had the fourth largest intraday, one-day turnaround that we've ever had in the U.S. stock market. The previous three occasions fell back in 1987 and then twice in 2008. And market historians now look back on all three of those and see the clear fingerprints of the president's working group on financial markets, also known by the slang term Plunge Protection Team. If the Plunge Protection Team was associated with those other three turnarounds, then I guess why wouldn't we think that they were associated with the turnaround on election night and the next day? We also saw that day some incredible moves in the foreign exchange markets, but also in the U.S. bond market, treasury bond market. And that's the one that I think people have kind of overlooked and tried to ascribe, some rationale, some reasoning for why it moved the way it did. We had the day after the election, the largest percentage one-day move ever in U.S. interest rates in the U.S. bond market, ever. I mean, this is about the biggest financial markets in the world, the U.S. bond market, and we had the largest one-day move ever. The day after the election, I speculated on my site at the time that this couldn't just simply be a change in asset allocation amongst global hedge funds. This had to, for a move of this size, it had to be some sovereign actors in play, and we've since found out that week there was massive dumping of treasuries by the Chinese and the Saudis. And we speculated on that at the time. Like I said, the data has proven it since that, that was really what was going on. And so what we had was this big move in interest rates that day. That was because the Chinese and the Saudis, in anticipation of maybe some changing diplomatic situation, decided to take matters in their own hands and begin to sell some of their foreign currency reserves held in treasuries. All of this, Dunnigan, just belays the point. I mean, we're setting up for what's going to be, I just think, a totally wildly unpredictable 2017. The message that's put out there in the mainstream media is that it's all going to be really simple. That Trump's going to be good for the stock market, interest rates are going to go up, and the dollar's going to get stronger, and it's just going to be this blissful euphoria of everybody getting rich. Usually, when there's a consensus, and this is an overwhelming consensus, when there's a consensus, it's wise instead to be a contrarian. And I suspect that 2017 is not going to play out as simply as many people are leading folks to believe.
Well, also, you have spoken recently on what historically has happened when, for example, the Fed ratchets up interest rates at the end of the year. If that were to happen this year, can you tell us more about, remind people what happened the last time that occurred?
Yeah, if we were to wind back a year, the Fed had promised that they were going to be raising interest rates in 2016. 2015. They never got around to it until we got all the way into the fourth quarter. December 16th last year at the Fed meeting in December is when they finally hiked rates. Well, the economy had already begun to slow in the third quarter and into the fourth quarter. And after that rate hike, if you think back to the first two quarters of this year, we limped along at 1.1% growth. Well, now, after those two 1.1% growths, which kind of held off any further rate hikes, finally got, allegedly, GDP to spike in the third quarter of this year. That was laid out there as being proof that the economy now is soaring and we can do a rate hike. Well, at the time when that was announced, what kind of got glossed over is of that 3% growth in the third quarter, a full 1% of that came from a growth in healthcare costs, thank you to Obamacare. And another 1% came from a one-time massive export of soybeans from the U.S. You remove those two, we're still growing at just 1%. And now indications are that just like the fourth quarter last year, we're slowing again, slowing back down to 2%. And so from an economic standpoint, things are shaping up just as they did a year ago. The Fed's going to raise rates, the economy is going to slow, and that's going to hold them off from raising rates again. That's not the story, that you're being told. Additionally, the dollar has strengthened by an almost a record amount in the couple of weeks right after the election. While that sounds good on the surface, it's not good for the emerging markets around the world, specifically China, who has kind of loosely pegged their currency to the U.S. dollar. If the U.S. dollar goes up, the value of the Chinese yuan goes up as well. And they don't want that. They're an export-driven country. They want to have a weaker currency to make their exports more competitive. And so it sets off them devaluing their currency versus that peg to the dollar. The last two periods of yuan devaluation were in August of 2015 and in late December, early January of this year. And if anybody wants to remember back, August of 2015 eventually saw about a 10% drop in our stock market because of the liquidity crisis that followed that Chinese devaluation. And January of 2016 saw the same. So again, we'll see. There's this consensus, and the stock market was up 300 points today here on Wednesday. There's a consensus that it's, to the moon, happy days are here again, all that kind of stuff. Well, I just have a sneaky feeling that it may not be such a smooth sail in 2017.
And if we could turn our attention to a very sinister situation that we've spoken about with a number of our guests recently, but it just keeps gnawing at me, and I'm not going to let it go until I have a majority of viewers on the videos saying that they've heard enough about this, because I think it is just so impactful and so earth-changing to our ability to control our own liberty and our own finances, and that is the move hurtling us into a cashless society. Mm-hmm. If you could look with us at what are the signs and symptoms around that that we may be just kind of getting numb to, just taking for granted because it just seems like just a modernistic trend. Okay, that's just the way we get high tech, just keeping up with the times. But there's so much more to it than that. What do you believe is really driving it, and what do you see as the real impact on the individual?
Well, it's a very important topic, especially as we get into this idea of preparation for unforeseen events. The idea of having cash on hand, something that you can use to barter. And this is what physical precious metal ownership is often used for as well, in the event that the ATMs don't work. Well, if you've already got some cash on hand, or if you have some precious metal, you have something with which you can transact commerce, and feed your family and all that kind of stuff in the time of a crisis. The other thing about it from a preparation standpoint is there's a reason why sound money is written into the Constitution, because there's really an element of personal liberty and freedom that comes with, sound money first, but currency in general. Because as long as you have currency that is portable, that you can put in your pocket and take with you, then you do have this measure of freedom, to move around the country and do whatever you want. If your wealth and your savings are instead stored digitally, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm cynical, but it makes it very easy for forces in the government to take it all away from you in a keystroke. You're accused of a crime that you didn't commit, but because you're critical of the state, all of a sudden your assets are seized. Well, if all of your assets are held in digital form, that's pretty easy for them to do. So from a very large, 37,000 foot view, it's extraordinarily important that we don't move to a cashless society. Now, on a more specific level, here's the reason why they're trying to make it happen. And it's simply put, negative interest rates are the focus and the cause of this. Our banks in the U.S. have been, zombies, if you will, and have been kept alive by the Federal Reserve and their quantitative easing programs for about the last 8 years. And they have the appearance of health because they have earnings from all of their excess reserves that are paying them interest. I mean, we know they're not making very many loans, and the velocity of money has fallen to record lows. These banks are still being subsidized, if you will, not only in the U.S., but around the world. The problem is, because of all of the central bank policy, what is getting enshrined are negative interest rates. And that is really what it sounds like. A negative interest rate is the opposite of what anybody's ever been used to in dealing with any other borrower, be it a bank or a corporation, where you buy a bond, or a government where you buy a bond, or anything like that. In the traditional sense, you'd take $1,000 to the bank and you either put it in a savings account and they'd pay you 1% interest a year for the privilege of borrowing the money from you. Or maybe you buy a CD that pays 3% for a couple of years, that kind of thing. A negative interest rate is exactly that. You basically pay the bank for the privilege of storing your cash. Now, that seems crazy, right? I mean, that's not the way that's supposed to work.
Right.
And by paying the bank, you're essentially subsidizing the bank, right? If the central banks can't go on forever with QE programs and other subsidies, well, why not have negative interest rates where you have to, the depositor has to pay the bank for the privilege of holding the money? Okay, well, that may sound crazy, but that's actually what's going on now in Europe. A lot of government debt, short-term government debt. The German 2-year bond has a negative 0.7% yield. Negative rates in Switzerland as well. Those negative rates are being enshrined in Europe. There are now large banks in Europe, in Switzerland, in Germany that are actually charging negative rates to their customers. Okay, so Dunnigan, you get a note from your bank that says, hey, guess what? Instead of us paying you 1%, you're going to start paying us 1%. What's your first rational response to that?
Rational response of a person who's being charged for a service they don't want is to say, forget that. I'm going to go in there and pull my cash out of the bank, and I'm not going to pay your stupid fees. You can keep your fees and stick them somewhere. And then comes, wait a minute.
Exactly. I'll give me my cash. I'll go, put it under the mattress.
That's right.
Well, if cash has been eliminated, you can't do that anymore. And you don't have any choice but to keep your savings in the bank, which allows the bank to not only charge you 1%, they could charge you 3% if they want. It's a forced bail-in rather than a bailout on the backs of the American consumer or whoever the people are that these negative rates are being forced upon. This, like I said, they're already getting this in Europe. It's coming here eventually as well. That's why these trial balloons are being floated by people like Larry Summers, used to be the Secretary of the Treasury. What do we even need cash for anyway? It's a nuisance. You can buy stuff by flashing your cell phone at the barista, that kind of stuff. Well, the reason why you need cash is so that, one, from that very large view, for personal liberty and freedom, and to keep the state from having the power to take it away from you in a keystroke. But on a more practical basis, you need cash so that the banks don't have the power over you either. And that's why these bankers and their economists keep saying that, well, why don't we just eliminate cash? Let me give you this one. Then again, there's about $1.3 trillion in actual currency, coin and currency in the U.S. I think the actual money supply is north of $15 trillion. But the actual amount that's in currency is only about 10%. It's about $1.3 trillion. If you eliminate the $100 bill only, and that's a lot of what's discussed, is we just get rid of the 100. If you get rid of the $100 bill only, you eliminate about $650 billion of that $1.3 trillion, actually more than half, just by eliminating the $100 bill. Now, when you read these articles from these fuzzy-headed economists that say, well, the only people that use $100 bills anyway are bookies, and drug dealers and all these illicit, black market kind of things. Well, that's not true. If you say you had $20,000 in the bank and you got that letter and you said, well, the heck with this. You go march into your bank and say, I want my $20,000. Well, first, after you filled out a form and you're told by the bank manager that we don't have that much on hand. Right. I didn't say they did. $20,000 is 200 $100 bills.
No problem.
Oh, yeah, you could stuff those into your pockets, and it would look kind of funny, but you could get them in there. Well, it's 1,000 $20 bills. Now, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. I don't even want to do the math as to how many fives it is. Where are you going to store all that? And so that's why, at the more practical level, that is why there's this discussion about eliminating cash altogether. And then, again, don't even get me started on the possibility of why you need it. The possibility of these bank holidays like we've seen in Greece, India. Let's not even talk about Venezuela, where the banks have to close for 3 or 4 days because they're insolvent or whatever. And you can't get any money out of the ATM, or you can only get $40 out of the ATM. If you have I don't want to call it a personal stockpile, and you got to be real careful where you keep this stuff. If you've got a bunch of cash laying around, it needs to be in a safe, and bolted to the ground and all that kind of jazz. But if you did have some, it could come in awful handy if there's ever civil unrest, societal, social unrest, natural disaster, all that kind of stuff. So, for all of the reasons that we discussed about why these economists and bankers want to eliminate cash, it's just a good idea to have some anyway in your preparation, just to have some on hand, just as you would anything else, your dry goods and everything else that folks are doing.
I'm thinking of back at college when they were having us read Franz Kafka novels, where the farther you read into it, the more you feel like you're just caught in this bad dream where you can't reach out and really touch and hold on to anything. There's nothing solid. There's nothing you can count on. Nothing you can trust. You feel helpless and powerless and lost in this system, this maze that's bigger than you are. And I think about in a cashless society, you as a worker, you go to do your job, you give your life blood and in your time, your very life energy, and in return, rather than receiving something tangible in return, there's just this transfer that's out of your control and out of your hands that goes electronically, depositing these cashless numbers into your bank account, which is still outside you can't touch it, you can't hold it, you can't control it, you can't make, all the choices about it, and because it's not really yours. And then that gets back to the nature of the deposit itself. When we were young, we thought the old thing was that's as good as money in the bank. Money in the bank was the same. Yeah. But we're told that now with the banking regulations having changed, you don't even own that money anymore. It's not even yours. It was currency when you put it in there, but now you're just an unsecured creditor of the bank, and they're off using that for something else. And so it's completely, from the moment you put out the work, you never get the fruit of your labors back into your control. Your life is basically owned. It's like that old sad song about I owe my soul to the company store or whatever. You work all day, and all of your life's energy is is outside of your influence and outside of your control from that moment on. It's in the banks can stealth tax you on whatever they want. The government can, they can bail in, stealth tax you in whatever way they want.
Yep.
And you can't just go in and say, I'm taking my money, because there's
right. And that you hit on it, Dunnigan. That's exactly why they are. Again, all you got to do is, anybody listening to us, just start noticing this now. Notice how many times you see on your Yahoo News roll or on the Drudge Report or wherever you go for news. I mean, it's almost every day now. There's some story about, the benefits of eliminating cash. And hey, you really want to, don't even get me started talking about the Book of Revelation. Needing the mark of the beast, right, to transact anything. You eliminate cash, and all of a sudden, you can't do anything without whatever the government says you got to have on you, a microchip in your hand or something. I mean, it all sounds crazy and sci-fi, but it's very much all within the realm of possibilities going forward. And this elimination of cash is something everybody needs to fight.
So you mentioned holding on, going ahead and making small withdrawals and retaining a significant and perhaps a portion of cash in your own possession and keeping it safe. What else can people do in addition to that to take a significant portion of their wealth out of the banking system's control?
Well, the key that we talk about at TF Metals Report, obviously, is the physical accumulation of gold and silver, not shares of an ETF, and not mining shares. Though it's kind of fun to talk about those every once in a while. But the real deal, the gold coins, the silver bars, all that stuff. We know that those two elements have been accepted as money for millennium, and they always will be. They are a store of value. Gold, if anything, always protects your purchasing power. And so it's logical to save in gold anyway, because as you said, you work, your savings are the accumulated, value of all of your work. And as long as you keep it in dollars, and as long as the Federal Reserve and the Department of the Treasuries are creating infinite amounts of new dollars, your stored work is being devalued by holding it in dollars. Now, I recognize you've got to continue to hold some, and people invest it and they hold dollars just because that's what's accepted as legal tender. But it is, far more logical and practical to instead try to save actually in precious metal instead, because the precious metal can't be printed. It can't be just summarily devalued by a central bank. So in my view, it's wise not only to have precious metal on hand just from a preparation standpoint, because you don't know, when some crisis is going to hit. It's also wise to save that way anyway, because gold protects your net worth and your purchasing power from all of this fiat money creation and devaluation.
Well, Craig, if there's other aspects of this that people want to see your writing and your blog entries, your podcasts about, where can they find more?
I tell you, Dunnigan, I just can't be more proud of the people on my site. I am the benefactor of a community of individuals that have entrusted me with this website, really. I built it, I run it, I pay the bills, all that kind of stuff. But the value of TF Metals Report is all the people there that are like-minded in a sense that we all recognize where we are in the world and the situation that is being forced upon us. And though we're not all in like-minded, politically and all that kind of jazz, we all recognize we're in the same boat, that this debt monster, this Keynesian economy monster is reaching, toward its death throes, and we all have to deal with it. So TF Metals Report is this community of folks that are all, like I said, kind of like-minded in that regard. So it's a great site from a free standpoint, but there's also analysis that I provide every day, podcasts that I provide every day. That's $12 a month. So keeps the lights on, but it's not a deal breaker for a lot of folks either. I just encourage people to check it out. It's like I said, the community aspect of it is the best part. and it's tfmetalsreport.com.
Well, Craig Hemke, founder of tfmetalsreport.com, always appreciate you joining us here on Reluctant Preppers, and we'd love to have you back again sometime soon.
Thank you, Dunnigan. Yeah, let's shoot for 2017. It's going to be, I think, a wildly unpredictable year.
We'll be glad to have you along helping us interpret the bumps in the road. So thanks, Craig.
My pleasure.